Welcome to the March 16th meeting of the Mobile City Planning Commission. I would like to take a moment to review our general operating procedures. Our meeting is divided into two sessions, public hearing session and deliberation. In the public hearing session, an application or group application on the agenda is called. The applicant makes his or her presentation. Commission members ask questions, if any, and members of the public make their comments. A reminder to everyone in the audience that only 4 people may speak for an agenda item or 4 people against an agenda item. I suggest with some of these agenda items, you decide who those 4 people will be. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, subject to questions by the commission. After 4 minutes, a loud beep will indicate you have 1 minute left to speak, and at that point, we ask you summarize your comments. After all opposition speakers have finished, an applicant will be given time to respond. If you do intend to speak, please come to the podium at the bottom of the stairs, speak into the microphone, give your name and address for our minutes. Please direct all comments to the commission only and not to the applicant or the audience, and please remember to speak directly into the microphone. On routine applications, an applicant may simply raise his or her hand if there are no objections to the staff recommendations. We will then announce that the applicant is in full agreement with those recommendations. If there are any questions, an applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. After hearing all the applications on the agenda, the commission will then go into deliberation for each agenda item, where we discuss each application with input from staff as necessary, but with no input from the audience. Commissioners then vote on each application, and the results of that voting can be learned from the planning department. If some issues arise in deliberation that were not addressed in the public hearing, we have the discretion to allow additional comments pertaining to those issues to resolve them or call for the application to be held over for discussion at a future meeting. Occasionally, 1 or more commission members may recuse themselves from discussing and voting on a given application. That does not necessarily mean the member is directly involved in the application or the applicant, but depending upon the circumstances, ethical rules may require a recusal when there's only the slightest appearance of a conflict of interest. A planning commission makes final decisions subject to appeal on subdivisions, planning approvals, and planned unit developments, or PUDs. Planning Commission only makes recommendations on zoning applications, with the City Council making the final decision. At this time, please turn your cell phones to off or silent or vibrate. Commissioners and staff, please remember to turn on your microphones when speaking. Roll call, myself, Jay Stubbs present, Mr. Alan Cameron, Ms. Jennifer Denson, Mr. Carlos Gant, Ms. Shirley Sessions, here. Mr. Taylor Atchison, Mr. Matt Anderson, Mr. Nick Amberger, here. Mr. Scott Jones, Ms. Susan Carley, Mr. Kirk Matei. We have a quorum, and I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. So moved. Properly moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Number 1 on the agenda item from holdovers, west terminus of Circle Court, west of Bryant Road. It's been recommended for tentative approval with 13 listed conditions. However, I understand some revisions have been made. Comments from staff?
Yes, sir. After...
Microphone.
Yeah, I think I'm there. After reports were drafted, the application submitted a revised plan. What they are now proposing is they're showing dedication. Hold on. There we go. They're showing the dedication of 50 feet of right-of-way here. Okay, can you hear me? Wow, that's okay. They're showing the dedication of 50 feet of right-of-way. However, 2 points on that. 1, here it only scales to 40 feet. 2, it is a substandard street with no curb and gutter, therefore 60 feet is required. They are not proposing the turnaround, and I believe they are proposing the vacation of what was to be for the turnaround here.
Does that in any way change staff recommendation on tentative approval with 13 listed conditions?
Yes, because if if the right-of-way is going to be dedicated, it needs to be 60 feet. Now, that is based on the plan that was submitted after reports are made. I'm thinking of the way to say this. So that would be to try and provide conditions for this plan. We can go through our recommendations and give you the revision, but I want the applicant to be able to speak to the fact if we're going to dedicate this right-of-way back to the city, we're looking for 60 feet to get a compliant street.
Is the applicant present?
I'm Jerry Luker with Speaks and Associates. We wanted to request,
A little bit closer. And your address, please, sir.
we wanted to request that this be held over till the next meeting to give us time to resolve these issues and everything. The owner had some reservation about all of this, but he finally came to a decision. So other than the 60-foot right-of-way, which we're going to have to address, we would like to hold it over and resubmit a plan for review at the next meeting.
Staff's agreeable, but we had issues last time receiving that plan within an adequate amount of time to review. We need that plan submitted by Monday to have this at the next meeting.
The date of that next meeting? Is that
April 6th.
April 6th.
I'm fine with that. Staff's agreeable to that.
Mr. Jones, what was that date?
And from Mr. Luker, I guess, you let your client know it's either got to be private or public, and it can't. I mean, this is kind of a tweener what's proposed here, and it's just you got to let them know it's got to be one way or the other. And if it's going to be public, it's got to meet all the requirements of being a public street.
We have, and that's the deliberation that's been going on.
Sure.
He in the end, he got into a little bit more with this than he had anticipated. So,
All right, thank you, sir. Is anyone else here to speak for agenda item number 1? Anyone here to speak against this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on. Still under holdovers, number 2 on the agenda, north side of Government Street, east of South Ann Street, the Griffith subdivision. It's been recommended, subdivision, a PUD, and a rezone. Subdivision's been recommended for tentative approval with 8 listed conditions. The PUD has been recommended for approval with 3 findings of fact and 7 listed conditions. And the rezone has been recommended for approval with 2 listed conditions. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Mr. Byrd.
Jerry Byrd, Byrd Surveyan, and the applicant is present here also. We're okay with all of the recommendations. I just wanted to go over with what we're here for today. This property was developed 25 years ago as a car wash. The subdivision is comprised of a 1 lot in a recorded subdivision and a meets and bounds parcel. That was the way it was allowed to be developed. Current standards require that you combine those 2 into a single lot, and that's what we're doing. The rezoning, when it was developed, westernmost parcel is zone B2, easternmost parcel zone B1. Current standards is to have a single zoning classification per lot. Now, the property is zoned or developed as B2, and that's the reason we're asking for the B2. And like I said, those 2 items only involve the easternmost 2 parcels of the PUD. The PUD is there because the entrance into the car wash comes across those 2 parcels of property. the service station, another parcel, and then enters into the car wash building. That's all it amounts to.
Thank you, Mr. Byrd. Any questions or comments from commissioners for the applicant? All right, this time I'll make a comment for commissioners. You have stapled packets, both in opposition and support of this agenda item. A reminder that this agenda item will limit to 4 speakers for and 4 people against. At this time, I'll ask if anyone is here to speak for this agenda item. There are plenty of seats down low. And the air conditioner's going and yeah. Can you hear me? Good. Let's try and talk loudly into the microphones today. Sorry about that.
I'm Bennett Griffith. I am 50% owner of Griffith Service Station, married to Stephen Griffith. I understand this is a place where, well, excuse me, I've tried to get my speech down to 5 minutes. I might have to take a second 5-minute spot, and my husband's fine with that. I understand this is a place where differing opinions are able to be stated and important things are discussed and decided on. But people have stood here and made false comments, statements over and over again. And that is something I was not expecting. It's very difficult to run a small, family-owned business in today's world, one that employs people sometimes for a lifetime, pays sales tax to the city, county, and state, pays their property tax, their personal property tax, expensive business licenses, business privilege tax, and more. Opinions are one thing, but making false statements and false accusations in city meetings, neighborhood meetings, and social media groups to manipulate what people think in order to fit their narrative, well, those things could potentially be debilitating for some businesses. So I'm setting the record straight from the start of today's meeting. We've tried to remain quiet and not waste your valuable time defending all the misinformation that's been put out there throughout our process. But it's time we speak up. I'm asking for your support on this zoning application. And in doing that, I feel it's necessary to shut down the false information. I've removed 3 to 4 pages to try and stay within 5 minutes. If I run out of time, well, I'm not. I'm going to take the next slide. As you're aware, we were meeting with some of the neighbors about voluntary deed restrictions we had willingly agreed to place on our property. We were presented with a list of 57 restrictions by these neighbors. We told them we could agree to 46 of the 57. The following are the 11 we said we could not agree to. Auto service, car wash, convenience store with gasoline sales, food sales above 60,000 square feet, gasoline sales with auto service, mobile food vendor park, restaurant with drive-through, restaurant drive-in walk-in, snack or beverage bar. We've been accused of submitting the restrictions form without the approval or knowledge of this group. It was made very clear the form must be turned in 7 days prior to the meeting. We explained to the neighbors that we requested the date of February 2nd as our next meeting, which was on our calendar. But instead, it was put on the 15th. We turned the form in by the deadline for the February 2nd meeting. This was not deceitfully done. We were trying to follow the rules. These neighbors would not respond to this or to 4 more emails sent as we were continuing to give them information. They cut off communication. We've been told that unless we agree to every restriction these people want, this rezoning of one parcel will not be passed. During the second meeting we attended, we were told we went about this process all wrong. What most businesses do before they submit applications to the city is meet with the neighbors to see what they want put on that person's property. Is that truly what other property owners do? It wasn't disclosed by anyone with the city when applications were being submitted. After those comments, we did ask, and they did not give a single idea. They will say they did, just like they did in last week's meeting, and it will be a false statement. What they did ask us, though, is if we'd consider taking all the property back to B1 zoning. Am I too close? Sorry, thank you, Doug. I had to remove 4 pages from what I'd written, proving all the misinformation and false statements that have been made here. 5 minutes doesn't come close to the time needed. To save time, I can only list some of the statements that have been made. Further explanations are readily available. Please know if these or others are brought up again today, we're prepared for a rebuttal of the truth on each. Stated several times, there are multiple citations issued for these trucks that Mr. Griffith has still never paid, even to this day. Misinformation. He tried, he was told to wait. Also, not multiple. The judge said something was done incorrectly. They're not multiple. The truck business has been run illegally for years. Misinformation, missing the facts that led us here. These neighbors knowingly used the error made by the city on our variance request to spread false information to other neighborhood organizations, stating our intentions were to put the truck rental business on the entire property. False and misleading information. They're going to stretch it until they can get all those trucks on the entire property. False and misleading. They have been told, we have said it over and over again, our intentions have not been to put it on the entire property. We applied for a use variance to allow 2 to 3 trucks to be temporarily parked for reasons ranging from needing repair work and maintenance, refueling, or needing to be returned to the leased property. There have been multiple environmental issues caused by Griffith Shell. Misinformation. 19 years ago, after receiving a use variance for the car wash area, there's never been a single car washed there. It's just been their plan all along to get B2 violated and then go on to the next property. These are exact quotes. They're on the videos. 100% false. Almost laughable, except it's derogatory towards a small business. After a variance was given for the car wash area in 1999, Griffith Shell never fulfilled their obligations. Absolutely false. Landscaping was done, berm was completed. As a matter of fact, last summer, some of that shrubbery had died out, and I myself and my husband got out there and replanted some shrubs because it had died out, and that was a part of the agreement. We cannot trust the Griffiths to do what they say they're going to do. There's so many similar comments to this one. False, unfounded, and misinformation. The restaurants along Government Street cause huge amounts of litter. Well, therefore, the Griffiths should not be allowed to put a restaurant on their property. False information, the restaurants do not throw their trash in the streets. The people who live within our city do that. These neighbors now want to know what happened during last week's Board of Adjustments meeting. Why did they approve the variance application? Maybe the variance application was passed because the corrected information was resubmitted. Maybe there's understanding that Griffith Shell does actually work on and fuel up many types of trucks that sometimes need to be parked in a commercial parking area, which every business must have. Possibly it was passed because they were given the facts and truth of our intentions and not the fiction or negative image they tried to create of a small family-owned business.
Ms. Griffith, let's get you to summarize your comments, please, ma'am.
I'm done with their comments. This is something I wrote in one of the emails I sent, but I'm going to say it again for everyone to hear, and because I'm assuming there's a pretty good chance it wasn't forwarded to the rest of the neighbors. Until we met with this small group, we had no idea how much they did not like the idea of Griffith Shell being on that corner. And it's his corner. That man grew up on that property. For those that don't have any idea, it's really a shame. It's been listed as one of Mobile's landmark businesses. Has had 3 local plays written about it. It's very reputable, always has been, and was even written up in a national magazine as being one of the most honest gas stations in the Southeast. Griffith Shell has its own valuable, rich history, and like it or not, it's definitely a part of that historical district. Some of the neighbors that are newer than 65 years being there might just need to remember that. That business, which is Stephen Griffith, has helped many, many people. Stories most people are unaware of, a letter sent, because people, I won't go over it, I'll save the time. Many compliments, people they've helped from out of town, given money to people who are out of money trying to get back across the country. This process has been brutal. I was warned, but I wasn't expecting it to be as true as what some people said. Today will be the 4th public meeting in which I will have listened to people, excuse me, who call themselves neighbors, run a smear campaign full of false statements against one of the most honest and hardworking men I've ever known. And yes, that would be my husband. But there are hundreds upon hundreds of people to back up that statement. I'd like to ask all of you something. If this were your business property and you'd been through a process in which the people you were trying to work with and compromise with for 5 months had publicly, falsely accused you of being deceitful, lying, not fulfilling obligations, plus other false statements, and you knew they were going to continue to fight against you, continue to make defamatory statements in public places and in written statements about your business, and they want you to put 46 or more restrictions on the deed to the property your father once owned, which would also lower your property value. If you knew all of this, how would you handle those restrictions? It's a realistic and a very necessary question to be considered. Thank you, and I'm sorry I took so long.
Thank you, Ms. Griffith. Anyone else here to speak for this agenda item? Seeing none, is there anyone here to speak against this agenda item? Please come on down, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Edward Walters. I live in Clark County, Alabama, 20 Crestwood Drive, Dickinson, Alabama, 36436. I'm here to speak on behalf of Stephen Griffith and Griffith Shell. I am a supporter of historic preservation. I lived here for 30 years. I lived in it wasn't the Linecoff district, it was no district, but I lived on South Monterey during the time it became a district. I live in Dickinson, Alabama now. I have a shield on my house. I am recognized by Clark County and the state of Alabama as the house is in historic condition shape. It's an old farmhouse, but there it is. I'm hearing things that horrify me. I don't know the Stephen Griffith that has been referenced with these comments from these other people. And I don't know them, but if they're saying these things about him, those things are not true. When I was a small child and came to Mobile with my daddy, we went to Virginia Street Lumber Company at that time, early 50s. When we got to Ann and Government, I knew I was in Mobile. There was All Saints and there was Griffith Shell. And it's still Griffith Shell and All Saints. And those are iconic places. I don't know what the historic status is, but there ought to be one. It's not just the houses that are historic. You've got historic businesses in historic neighborhoods. I don't think what they're asking for is as a business plan, a person who's got property and a business needs some assurance that they can go forward with a certain number of plans. They got 40 some odd restrictions that they've agreed to. So I don't understand that. But these are the most honest people I know, because I've dealt with it. I'll be 74 tomorrow. I'm historic. So I've known them a long time. I've traded there all my life. I trade with them when I come to town now. I'm here frequently visiting in one of the historic districts.
1 minute.
One left?
1 minute.
Pretty good. Character is worth something. I don't see it as I did when I was a younger man, and maybe that's my viewpoint. But this family is of character. They have hired people of character. I've become good friends with several of the employees there over the years, and they have been long-term employees. This is not a cut and paste deal. This is a family business that's been there since 1929, but the Griffiths have had it since the 50s when I lit up when I got to that intersection, and there they were. They're still there. But to me, the fair thing to do is to give them the zoning request, let them have some reasonable control over what they can expect to do with their property, so they don't have to go through all of this again when they decide to take some action with the property that is within the rules. And that's what I'm asking for. And
Thank you, sir.
I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, sir. Clearly, that was for the agenda item. I'll ask if there are 2 more speakers for this agenda item. Time has expired for. We'll now move to the speakers against this agenda item.
Can I ask a question of the staff? There's references to the Board of Zoning adjustment. Just, can we clear that up? What happened last week? And
Yes, sir.
define what we have in front of us today versus what happened last week.
Yes, sir. And I think because it's been referenced, I need to clarify. When the application was initially presented to the board, we had this site plan that you see behind you now, generally speaking, for the Board of Adjustment, for the truck rentals. Well, actually, on their legal description for their request, again, to the Board of Adjustment for truck rentals, it only described this portion of property. So we had to hold it over to properly advertise and to illustrate, as far as truck rental is concerned, this was the only lot considered by the board. The use variance was approved a week ago this past Monday, and it was limited to 3 truck rentals at any single point in time on this property only. That use variance is completely independent of the requests before the Planning Commission today. Before the Planning Commission, here you have the overall boundaries of the site. You have a PUD to connect. You have all the access through the various properties. So that is for the PUD request. These are already legal lots of record. So before the commission today is a subdivision to create this legal lot of record. And then rezone this B1 portion on the east end to B2 so that the lot will have one zoning designation.
And just so I'm clear, because this, there's also a PUD in front of us.
Yes.
And so are we treating that original plan as the plan?
Yes. This right here, which is what's on the property now, this is what is submitted for the PUD.
So any future changes to this PUD, any additional buildings would come back before this body to be approved?
any major modifications would go to both the Planning Commission and the City Council.
Any further comments from commissioners? All right, ma'am, your name and address for the record.
My name is Sherry Hewitt, Hewittsheri. I live at 170 South Georgia Avenue, which is 1 block from Griffith Shell across the street. I was at the other meeting as well and spoke. This is not a personality fight. This is not a fight against Stephen, not a fight against the Griffith name. It's about usage of property that is in a historic district. I spoke before about the creeping blight. We are not against business owners. We are very uneasy about not what Stephen is going to do, but what happens when Stephen sells that big piece of property. Then what happens? Right now, there is a for sale sign on that property. Villa sale. It says for sale. Contact Villa. What is that going to be? That's what we are fighting against. If that property is not all zoned as one big chunk, it is already has restrictions on it because of the size. When he went before for the zoning variance, he kept saying over and over, it's a very slim, narrow piece of property. It no longer is a narrow, slim piece of property when you add the other piece to it with the same zoning. Now it is a very saleable, large piece of property. It used to be, as was said by Mrs. Griffith, we called it Society Shell. Everybody went there because it was full service. You pulled in, they pumped your gas, they even washed your windshield. People went there. People paid that high price for the gas because they like to have their gas pumped and their windshield wiped. Well, that's no longer true. That's not why I don't trade there. I don't trade there because the gas is too expensive. We started off with a gas station. Then it went to a convenience store that sells beer. That changes the whole flavor right there. Now it's gone to a truck rental place. That's what we're afraid of. What comes next? What does come next? We love our neighborhood. We're not against big businesses. We love Gunkel's. Gunkel's is a low-profile little bakery. We'd love to have a little restaurant, but not with drive-through. We have enough traffic there as it is. It's very difficult to go from my side of South Georgia Avenue to the other side of South Georgia Avenue, which is all residential. That's all. I would like you to vote against this because it is just not good for Mobile. And it scares the hell out of all of us.
Thank you, Ms. Hewitt. Next speaker for this agenda item in opposition.
Ann Moore Stafford, 311 McDonald Avenue.
A little bit closer. Raise the
Oh,
microphone.
I'm sorry. Is that better? Not really, okay. How about that? I'm Ann Moore Stafford. I live at 311 McDonald Avenue. I left Mobile in 1972, swore I'd never come back, but you never say never. My husband and I retired in Austin, Texas 3 years ago and arrived in Mobile the day of the beginning of the lockdown for pandemic. So it's been an interesting 3 years. We are lucky to live in the Lioncoff district. We were lucky to find a house, quite frankly, in the early days of the pandemic that we could even go in and look at. We love our neighborhood. We love being this close to downtown. And one of the things that makes it so attractive to us is the fact that it is such a beautiful area that clearly loves its neighborhoods, its trees. It's the entrance for most people coming into our city, they come down Government Boulevard. There are these beautiful, stately homes on either side. There are a smattering of businesses in there that belong there. And, you know, quite frankly, my family has long history with Griffith Shell, and it's always been positive. Preston was very helpful when it was time to take a car away from our father who had dementia. They lived in Oakley. But one of the reasons we left Austin was because we no longer recognized that city. We've been there for 40 plus years. And in that time, so much that had been precious at one point was no longer important. And houses and small businesses and trees were removed for high rises, for high tech, for a number of uses that were no longer compatible with the neighborhoods around them. And that ended up creating problems for those neighborhoods and a lot of white flight and neighborhood blight and I don't mean to say white flight, ownership blight, ownership flight. It created a lot of changes to communities. People who lived in those communities could no longer afford to live there. There is a Hispanic district east of the interstate that has been a lively Hispanic neighborhood since probably the 1920s. And most of the families have been gentrified out. Now, I understand one piece of zoning change is not going to change an entire part of town, but it can set precedent. And that's what I'm worried about. I believe the Griffiths when they say they want to do something good there. They want to do something compatible. What I don't believe is that the next people, there's a for sale sign on the lot, that the next people are going to have the same commitment, or the people after that, or the people after that. I'm the secretary of the Lankoff Neighborhood Association. We are concerned and supportive of our neighbors in Oakley and Old Dauphin Way, and understand that while there may be boundaries between the neighborhoods, Government Street runs through all of it, and we all share the responsibility for making sure that remains a viable, beautiful corridor in a city that takes pride in its heritage, its historical buildings, and you know that's a big part of why people come here. Let's not take a chance on creating a zoning situation that becomes a bigger problem down the road. Let's make sure that the uses for this area are not so broad that the city loses control. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stafford. We have 2 more slots for speakers in opposition.
My name is Catherine Flowers. I live at 922 Conti, but I'm speaking on behalf of All Saints Episcopal Church. My husband is the rector there. It's right across from Griffith Shell. And to reiterate several of the other people, we don't have a problem with Griffith Shell. We like Griffith Shell. But this is a planned unit development, and we don't know what it's going to be. And that's the problem with it. We don't know what it's going to be, and B2 is a pretty wide open area for fast food restaurants. There's enough fast food restaurants on the street. As Ann said, this is where people coming into Mobile see, and it's beautiful with the trees and the old houses, and adding, it can be a big gas station. That's one reason we asked for the gas station and the convenience store. If they were to sell it, or if somebody later on were to sell it, it could be a huge Circle K. And that just doesn't belong on Government Street. It's hard to deal with. I live on Conti Street, and I have 2 planned unit developments on either side of me, and it has been a nightmare for us because we were one of the few houses there, and everybody promised us, you're going to love it, it's going to be great, and it has not been, because they did what they wanted. And I'm not saying the Griffiths are going to do anything, but it's hard to deal with us as homeowners and All Saints. What will happen? It's a planned unit development. What's the development? We don't know. And that's why we're asking for the things that we asked: no fast food, no convenience store, no gas station. They already have a gas station that I understand that's separate from the planned unit development. So that's my problem with it. And it's a real problem turning out of that area. My husband was hit by a car turning out of that area because you can't turn east on Government from Ann. So everybody coming out of Griffith Shell that turns east hits people's cars. We have a huge oak tree by All Saints that has been hit multiple times from wrecks at that intersection because of the way you can't turn east on Ann and you can't turn south on Government when you're headed west. It's just a bad intersection, and it's a lot of traffic. So we'd appreciate, I don't know what the answer is, but we tried to meet with them, and it just was, we hit a snag. And to be perfectly honest, I had to ask the Griffiths to leave at one meeting because they got so upset with us. And we're just trying to say that we want to know what's going to be there, or at least something, so that we can deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Flowers. We have one more slot remaining for opposition.
Good afternoon. My name is Bill Boswell. I live at 1609 Government Street. I'm here on behalf of the Government Street Collaborative, which is a group of neighborhoods throughout downtown and midtown area. I've been involved with this situation with the Government Street Collaborative over the last 4 to 5 years. It seems more like a decade. We've been back and forth with the Griffith family with what they want to do, what we'd like to see there. Quite frankly, what we'd love to do is to be able to come to an agreement on a particular type of use, something that they have in mind. It's hard to fight something when you can't see it and you don't know what it's going to be. And that's what the neighbors are mostly afraid of. It's not about having a disagreement with the Griffiths. This is about what is going to happen in the future on that particular spot, which is right in the heart and the core of our historic districts along one of our most historic streets in Mobile. We did submit a list of exclusions to the Griffiths. They're correct in saying that they agreed to, I believe, 46 with around 12 or so remaining, and that is part of the staff's report showing those exclusions that we agreed upon and the few that we did not. The problem is that the most troublesome of the uses that we had requested that they denied are some of the ones that we feel are the most intense on the list of B2 uses. What I would like to see, and I don't know if this is possible, is for the Planning Commission to look at those exclusions that they did not agree to, and at least temporarily say, let's put those exclusions in, and then when you come with a proposal for a particular use, let's revisit it. Let us know what that is going to be, and then we can work together and resolve this issue. I don't like this chaos. We don't like this argument within our community. They are a part, as I've told Stephen on several occasions, you're a part of the neighborhood. You are one of our neighbors. You may not live there, but you have been there. Your family has been there. And this should not be a smear on their family. There's been such a disagreement, and it's hurt, I'm sure, their ability to do business with the neighbors, as many people have told me. And I don't want to see that. I want them to be able to conduct and be able to exploit the economic opportunity out of their property like anybody else. They should be able to do that. But they should not be able to do something that's going to put a burden onto the neighborhood that is going to devalue the residential properties in the neighborhood, which it will do eventually if this, depending on what goes there. I mean, and I want to trust the Griffith family with their promise that they're going to do right by this. And I feel probably like it's been said, they will themselves, but it's what comes after, because we know that it's hard to take a zoning. You can go up, but it's very hard to bring it back down. And we just want to make sure that future generations that come after us will be able to cherish the history and the lifestyle and the quality of life that many of us who live in this neighborhood have been able to enjoy. I just don't want it to be destroyed. I want the Griffiths to be able to be successful. I want them to be able to stay there as long as they want to be able to be there. But I want our neighborhood protected, and we can still work with them. I told Stephen before the meeting, whatever happens today, let's go forward into the future, and let's try to be good neighbors to each other and remain friends. So I'm asking you, do what you can as a body to create a decision today that's going to impact in a positive way and not tear our neighborhood apart. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Boswell. That now concludes speakers both for and against that agenda item. We'll move on to number 3 on the agenda. Comment from staff.
You need to allow the 2-minute rebuttal.
Thank you. Applicant, comment on any comments. Yes, please.
Very brief rebuttal to correct some inaccuracies. I'm Clay Lanham with Jones Walker, 11 North Water Street, Suite 1200. To correct some things, 2 of the speakers said that there are for sale signs in front of this property. There's no for sale sign in front of the property. It's a for lease sign. The Griffiths do not intend to sell the property. They're trying to find a tenant to lease it. It is currently occupied by a dilapidated, rundown car wash that attracts homeless people to sleep in at night. They want something nice there. They want a tenant to come in, tear the car wash down, and build something nice that will be nice for the neighborhood. It's going to be right next door to their business. It's good for the neighborhood as well as the city. The only reason that you would be opposed to this is if you like the car wash and you want it to stay there. If you're trying to attract a tenant, and a tenant looks at this as it currently is with 2 different tax parcels and 2 different zoning classifications, the tenant's going to move on and go down the road to the next parcel. They're not going to want to bother with this. So all the Griffiths are trying to do is clean this up and make it 1 parcel with 1 zoning so it can be leased by a future tenant to build something nice and replace the dilapidated car wash.
Thank you, Mr. Lanham. Is there anything else? Comments from the applicant? Questions from commissioners? Comments from staff? All right, thanks, Ms. Pappas, for reminding me on the rebuttal. We'll now move on to agenda item number 3, new subdivision application 4653, 4671, 4689, and 4717 Colgate Drive, Mobile Logistics Park subdivision. Recommended for tentative approval with 8 listed conditions. Applicant present, in agreement with the 8 listed. Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this agenda item? Anyone here to speak against this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to number 4, 5151, 5175, 5215, 5239, and 5345 Willis Road, the Crane Works 3 subdivision. It's been recommended for tentative approval with 7 listed conditions. Is the applicant present? Are you in agreement with the 7 listed conditions? Applicant is present and in agreement. Is there anyone else here to speak for this agenda item? Anyone here to speak against? Seeing none, we'll move on. New sidewalk waiver application, number 5 on the agenda, 2323 Hillcrest Road. It's recommended for a denial of the sidewalk waiver. Is the applicant present? Would you like to have any comments or questions?
Good day. I'm Pratt Thomas, Merrill P. Thomas Company, 4458 Emperor Drive. We are trying to build a coffee shop here, and in doing our due diligence and planning for this site, we spent months trying to work with urban forestry to develop a plan that would protect and preserve the 46-inch heritage live oak tree that's shown right there in the right-of-way on that site plan. That's Hillcrest Road along the left-hand side. We developed this plan to maintain a certain distance from that tree, the trunk of the tree, and there's a formula that urban forestry uses to calculate how much distance you need to make sure that you don't compromise the integrity of the root system. And essentially, we need to maintain 23 feet without disturbing this tree's root system. And so, in order to do that, we're requesting this sidewalk waiver.
Mr. Thomas, could that, if a sidewalk were to go in front of this, would it tie into any existing sidewalk to the north or south of you?
No.
What would you say the diameter of the tree was?
46 inches, or 43, 46 inches.
So it's pretty big.
We've got some trees on Airport that I know of where the sidewalk is quite a bit closer than 23 feet. That seems like a very large variance off the tree.
You're looking at me.
I don't. Well, I don't know if we don't have anybody here. I don't think that can really speak to
I
this.
tend to kill vegetation, woody or succulent. But we didn't receive any specialized comments from urban forestry on this matter. The commission can go ahead and make a decision today, or we can reach out to the urban forester and ask for some specialized comments on this application. You do have comments from engineering because it is not unusual to place a sidewalk on private property.
Yeah, the unfortunate challenge that exists in Mobile, it's with live oak trees and not enough real estate and sidewalks. You can't get them all. They don't all fit in the real estate that's typically there. And unfortunately, we plant these little bitty baby trees and they turn into these elephants. We routinely build sidewalks over live oak tree roots, and they routinely get disrupted and broken, and we go back and spend a lot of taxpayer dollars and or private dollars to fix them. So it's almost an impossible balance to make it all right. So just wanted everybody to hear that perspective.
If I'm looking at this right, I think there is a sidewalk on the west side of Hillcrest headed north, but there's not one on this side of Hillcrest. Y'all saying the same thing I am?
That's correct.
Yeah, but here, you got here, but there's none.
You can
here.
kind of see it on the aerial.
Okay.
On the west side.
Any further comments or questions from commissioners for the applicant? All right, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Anyone else here to speak for this agenda item? Anyone here to speak against this agenda item? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the final agenda item under group applications, 8053 Will Road Drive West. We have a subdivision recommended for tentative approval with 7 listed conditions. We have a rezone recommended for denial with 2 listed conditions. Is the applicant present? First, on the subdivision, are you in agreement with the tentative approval and the 7 listed conditions? Do you need to come down and speak? Okay, please do.
Hello, good afternoon. Can you guys hear me?
A little bit closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. My name is Tiana Darrington. My husband's name is Michael Darrington. He's the applicant on the application. And like he previously stated, we do agree to the conditions of the subdivision application.
So you're in agreement on the sub, but on the rezone, it's been recommended for denial with 2 listed conditions there. I guess the best way to start is to see if you understand the reason for the denial.
Yes, I believe I do. I see the first reason is because it's saying that we failed to illustrate one or more of the prevailing conditions that would warrant a rezoning. I wanted the opportunity, if I would be granted so, to try and speak to that and see if I can bring clarity to that area.
Absolutely.
Okay. So first, if I'm understanding correctly, I believe one of the prevailing conditions would be if changes in conditions for a particular area makes it necessary for an ordinance to be changed if it's desirable. Am I correct in thinking that or believing that? Okay. As you guys know, this area in particular is right across the street from the University of South Alabama. It's one of the areas that's the most popular and that brings a lot of people to our city in particular. The area has since, as you guys may know, they just developed the new Hancock Whitney Stadium there. They just brought out the fact that USA is actually going to be developing a 300,000 square foot medical facility for the medical students. There has also been a new facility by University of South Alabama Health. There's a new emergency center that's located there. And there's also multiple lots for sale in that area where new businesses will also be coming. So with that being stated, I feel as though there is there's an increase in the amount of jobs that are being provided in that area because of those developments, and there's only going to be more coming, which also will bring more jobs and more people to that particular area. However, right now, there's a lot of R3 zoning in the area, and one in particular is directly adjacent to the subject site. But there's not a lot of housing. There's not enough housing that's going to be able to keep up with the increased demand and the jobs that are currently coming and that are presently in that area. So I know when this was zoned back in a while ago, it probably wasn't as developed as it is now. So that's part of the reason why we were petitioning for a zoning change. Also, at the corner of Old Shell and Cody Road, it's currently zoned R1. However, there is a fruit stand that was operating there previously, and that was business operating there, and it's zoned R1. And as you head down Old Shell Road, heading closer to the university, there are also R3 developments, apartment complexes for student housing that is currently zoned R1 as well. And so I'm thinking that maybe the zoning wasn't updated on those as well, but majority of that area is beginning to be zoned R3.
Any questions or comments from commissioners for Ms. Darrington? Any comments from staff regarding R1 to R3?
She did address the concern regarding the prevailing conditions, that make the rezoning necessary and desirable. Staff's equally large concern is the substandard nature of Wilrow Road. Wilrow Road is a circle street. It is essentially gravel and dirt. It is not paved at all, and the right-of-way width is 40 feet or less for its entirety. So getting to the property, a city standard street could not be built without the acquisition of additional right-of-way. There are 4 buildings proposed with 2 units each. That's 8 homes on this one piece of property. And given the substandard nature of the road, it's just inadequate to serve it.
Mr. Commissioner?
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to reserve comment till later, but I'll go ahead and just, having lived out in this area for a number of years.
A little bit closer to the microphone.
And I deal with South Alabama quite a bit in the housing division of South Alabama. One of the challenges that we face in this area is the growth of apartment complexes that are already reduced in their residence rates because of lack of tenants in those apartment complexes. And there's another one that just got started. I think any more R3 development at this point is going to exacerbate a problem that we already experience in that area, at least currently. Maybe as South grows in the coming years, there's a way forward for additional R3. But right now, this is a challenge for the university and for District 6 and District 7 with this specific area. So I would concur with the staff comments in addition to all of those things being laid out right now. Thank you.
Do I have an opportunity to say something? Okay. I agree with you, like you're saying, with the R3 and there being a lot of R3 zoning in the area, and then there's not being enough tenants to occupy those particular spaces. However, one thing that I know personally is that most of the R3 developments that are currently being developed are designed specifically for students. So there may not be enough students to occupy those dwellings. However, our proposal isn't necessarily to target the students, but to give the people that work in that vicinity an opportunity to occupy these units. I know a lot of people want to be in that area, but they don't want to be surrounded by students. And they also may not have the available funds to be able to purchase a single family house in that area, especially being that majority of the buying pool right now and the buying population are millennials in the area. Millennials occupy the least amount of home ownership, although they're the precedent population. So the reason being, most of them aren't ready to purchase homes yet. However, they still contribute to those communities and would like to live close to where they work. And I feel as though they may not be able to do that without being in an apartment complex surrounded by students or purchasing a home. And that's kind of like their only 2 options at this point in that particular area.
Thank you, Ms. Darrington. Anyone else here to speak for this agenda item? For this agenda item? Yes, sir. Mr. Howard, I think it is. If I could get you to speak loudly, because the microphone and
is it working now?
It is. Go right ahead.
Yes, sir.
Your name and address for the record.
Murray Howard Jr. We're talking about the 8053 Wilbow Drive, Mobile, Alabama 36608. These people want to do something good for the community. My mama had 12 kids. It's only 3 of us alive, and all 3 of us want this done. I'm here today to see they get what they need to get done, where they can do something to help the community, because we need help in our community more than people realize. And I know these people here are very good at what they do, and I support them 100%, and my brothers and sisters that are still alive support them 100%. So please give them the right to do this where they can make something for our community and help people that need help. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. Is there anyone else here to speak for this agenda item, number 6, Wilrow Road? Anyone here to speak against this agenda item? Yes, sir.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Herbert Knapp. I'm at 8049 Real Road. Like the lady said earlier about the road, it's kind of, you have to take turns. That road is like a U shape. And if somebody's coming the other way, you have to pull off the side of the road, let the other car come through, because it's not wide enough for two cars come in and out. I'm against this because I live in that area, and I just rather see single family drilling, and we do need to do something about the road. And I don't know why the city never came in and paved it, because we get some real heavy rains, water comes off that road and just kind of like just washes the road into the yard. It's I don't know if y'all ever been in that area, and it's very nice, peaceful in that area where we at. And I just can't see multi-family dwellings. Like Scott said, down the road, just more apartments. That's all we get in Mobile, apartments everywhere. Every you turn around, people building apartments. I like to see that area, get developed in some nice houses. And that house where I'm at, been there for 20-something years. And everybody knows everybody. And I'm just against it. That's all I got to say. I'm against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Knapp. Yes, ma'am.
I hope you can hear me. I have a soft voice. My name is Carol Beach. I live at 28 Headstone Court, Mobile, Alabama. I'm currently president of the Cobblestone Homeowners Association. We are here today to voice our opposition to the rezoning of 8053 Wilrow Drive West from an R1 single family to an R3 multi-residence. This property backs right up to ours, which is Cobblestone Subdivision. We have currently 141 patio homes. About 90% of our residents are seniors and retirees. About half of our homes are occupied by senior ladies living alone. We can now sit in our yards, grill, enjoy retirement life. We all worked hard all our lives looking for our retirement, and this proposal will cause all of that to come to a halt, because if they build a multi-level building on this lot, which is barely big enough to put, you guys probably got houses bigger than on this lot. There's no way 4 houses can go in there. I have some pictures, be happy to show you. There was no mention of any on-site lighting as required by section 6446 of the zoning ordinance. It does require that lighting be provided for off-street parking requiring more than 10 spaces. If the lighting does not comply with section 64.4A2 and A3, the lighting would shine down right into our property and our yards constantly. Multi-level dwellings would have the same effect, looking down on our property and our yards. A protective buffer is required in order to comply with the section 64.4D. There was nothing in the plan about a buffer. In reviewing the proposed plans, there is no mention of any handicap accessibility. The site slopes from Old Shell Road, east and south,
towards subdivision cobblestone. Any development on this property would need to be in compliance with the city stormwater ordinance and require a retention or detention pond. If you look at the environmental locator map and the maps that we have showing the easement in cobblestone, there is nowhere for this water to go except onto our property and into our storm drains. And as the gentleman referred to earlier, anytime we have rain, we get this. This is our retention pond that all the water from Old Shell, all this property runs down into our easements along behind our houses. It's awful. When they put in Braden Square in 2004, they told us that they would direct the drainage from Old Shell right away to avoid this problem. They even wanted us to sign a hold harmless agreement, which we did not and would not. But they did hook it into lots 2 and 3 of our drainage, which is on Headstone Way. All that water now from Braden Square comes on us because they have a retention pond that they do not maintain. Their retention pond looks like this. We feel like the city screwed us one time. Now you're trying to do it again. The other objection that we have to this is any of that water flow goes directly into our pond. As I stated earlier, our storm drainage was started over 30 years ago in 1976. I want to take 5 minutes of somebody else's time. Right now, we have 10 sinkholes that are as a result of collapsing drainage. We've had malls come out. They have done their dye testing. The city has been out and filled up a few of them. We still have more to fill. If you grant this rezoning, the grass and dirt will be replaced by sidewalks, roads, and asphalt parking. We know the flooding is going to be more severe. We're going to have more homes damaged. The damage is going to be quite severe. If you grant this request, and it's kind of like the first people, fear of the unknown, because if you grant this request, that's a big piece of property. And if it goes from an R1 to an R3, there's no telling what the future's going to hold for that section and what the future's going to hold for our homeowners. Most of us have been there since it started in 1976. We call it our little diamond in the rough. We pay our taxes. We're quiet. We're seniors. We love it. We want to live our golden years out in peace without having to worry about being flooded every time it rains. Thank you for your time. Please deny this request, both of them, subdivision and rezoning.
Thank you, Ms. Beach. I've lost. Is that the second speaker in opposition? There are 2 more slots in opposition if they're needed. All right. That will now close the public hearing session. Wait. Oh, golly. Thank you. If I couldn't activate, Ty is cutting my oxygen off. Mrs. or Mr. Darrington, if you'd like to comment on the 2 opposition speakers. My apologies once again.
Okay, so I did want to address a couple of things that was stated in opposition of the development. One of the previous speakers noted that she said that the lot wasn't big enough to support one house on the particular lot. The lot is a half-acre lot, and we made sure that before drafting our site plan that our architect and engineers were able to accommodate the development, but also be in align with the city ordinance as far as setbacks and things of that nature. So we made sure that the unit and the development could actually fit on the lot prior to applying for the application. Secondly, there was an issue about the stormwater retention and things of that nature. And it seems as though the residents of that neighborhood feels as though it's a city problem and not necessarily a development problem. But furthermore, in our subdivision application, if it was approved, one of the conditions was stormwater retention, and that we make sure that that is addressed in the subdivision application. And we agreed to those. Notations in here. So if that was approved, as well as the rezoning, that would be taken care of. There is a ditch that runs directly behind this particular development, and I believe that that's what she was referring to. So if there was any additional accommodations that needed to be made in order to make sure that this was a safe development, then we would do whatever we needed to do if it was listed in one of the conditions, which I believe it is. The next thing, and they were talking about all the different areas of blight along, there's a lot of good things going on that particular side of the street, but there are also areas of blight. I do feel like this development would help to bring some beautification back to the area. I know that one of the speakers spoke about being there for an extended amount of time. However, that particular unit that they own is tenant occupied. It is not owner occupied. So I will say also that a 2-story development was at question here. However, by right, a single family home could be developed on that particular lot, and it could be a 2-story development, and that would still have the same issue. So, and it's not necessarily facing, the back of the units aren't facing the cobblestone neighborhoods. They wouldn't be able to look directly into the next neighborhood. It's actually facing the opposite way. So they won't be looking directly into the neighborhood of cobblestone.
Thank you, Ms. Darrington.
Say thank you.
I said thank you. Yeah. Now, at this time, we will close public hearing session and move back to agenda item number 1 for deliberation. Under holdovers, number 1, west terminus of Circle Court Drive Landing. Applicant was present. However, in discussion or in public hearing, looks like another holdover. Entertain a motion on, was there any date other than, I know, the 6th and the 20th?
Over the 20th.
Move to hold over to April 20th.
Second.
And can we ask for a condition that they submit their revised plans by close of business on March 31st in order to stay on that April 20th agenda?
Is the applicant still present? I don't see him. We'll need to communicate that to the applicant.
It would be in the letter of decision if the commission's agreeable to that condition.
Repeat that date, Ms. Pappas.
We would want the revised plan submitted to staff by close of business on March 31st to be considered at the commission's April 20th meeting.
I'll revise my motion as stated by staff.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion for holdover to April 20th with date of March 31st submission passes.
Let me remind everybody, this air conditioner is going on, and we can hear you. Some of y'all we can't. So please, even though you're talking in the mic, you need to speak up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Number 2, north side of Government Street, east of South Ann Street, the Griffith subdivision. Subdivision has been recommended for tentative approval with 8 listed conditions. The PUD has been recommended for approval with findings of fact of 3 listed conditions and 3 findings of fact and 7 listed conditions. And the rezone has been recommended for approval with 2 listed conditions. Extensive conversation, both submitted online and in person today.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. So, with regard to the voluntary use restrictions that were listed, do we need to make a particular amendment to our motions with regard to those?
Yes, for that to be condition number 3 on the rezoning if the commission is going to recommend this for approval. I would also say, Mr. Chairman, I think the logical order for consideration would be for the rezoning to be considered first, because that would then impact whether or not the subdivision and PUD should be approved.
Thank you, Ms. Pappas. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to say a couple things. So, I live in the neighborhood. I've been party to a few of the conversations around people's preferences and everything, and I want to address a couple of common themes that have come up about trust between the neighborhood and the applicant. From my perspective, trust is almost irrelevant in this situation because anything they do on that property that's significant is going to have to come back through the PUD process anyway, which is a double approval through the Planning Commission and the City Council. So adding, somebody suggested adding another layer of some other kind of approval, that's real. It would really be outside the bounds of what we would even normally do. But this already includes a double check on anything they would do, and they're in a historic district, so anything they propose to construct would have to comply with all of those restrictions as well. So, and then the other thing I just wanted to mention is that the applicant did show a willingness to compromise. Somebody said the most noxious uses were not excluded. I would think that the most noxious use I saw was the heliport or the liquor store or something like that. So I feel like they did, they in good faith came and tried, and they came in good faith and tried to compromise. So I would like to make a motion that we approve the zoning as listed and adding the condition number 3 of the listed voluntary use restrictions in the packet.
Second.
Properly moved and second on the rezone. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'll say this: the comments and some of the stuff that's been said is concerning, but I live in the neighborhood, go to Griffith Shaw all the time, see a bunch of my neighbors here. I come at this from a little bit different perspective. I completely agree that it does seem that putting a PUD on the entire property adds a level of restriction, and I think that's something that does feel like it hadn't been understood by all the parties, both sides. The other thing is, I get, and I'll go back. I remember, grew up going to All Saints. I remember when the now closed CVS was going in and all the debate about that. I just think this body, when we look at planning, and if you look at studies on how you develop good cities, the use of voluntary use restrictions, it's a dangerous slope to go down. And, with zoning, I think it's a better tool. This particular site, one thing that stands out to me is just a concern that a future owner of this would by right be able to have a gas station that expands that entire area. I have some problems with that when you look at what we've done with development, and then we're going to add on all these voluntary use restrictions. I'm just uncomfortable with the way this whole thing's played out. When this first came up to us a couple months ago, the first thing in my mind was that this is a use variance. And it sounds like the gas station has gotten the use variance. And, we're supposed to look at the future. I know a lot of the neighborhood's concerns, is we just want to know what's going on. That's something we hear all the time when it comes to rezonings, especially when a developer doesn't have, a clear plan. That's not really something that, this body can weigh a whole lot, because we've got to look at what the uses are and what future development may bring. My concern is that a future owner could expand this thing to be a gas station the size of a, truck stop by right. The PUD's on there. This rezoning, if approved, is going to go to the council, and so this is just one stop in the process. But to me, this feels like a use variance, which the Griffiths have gotten. So I'm a little uncomfortable with the rezoning, and I will vote against it. But I just think I'm coming at this from a little bit different way, because I think the way we're using these voluntary use restrictions really can hamstring us way down the road. I mean, this is my kids and grandkids, problem. I just think it's a dangerous slope, especially when we look at the developments along Government Street. When you look at all these convenience stores, the CVS, the Rite Aid, that are all closed now, that huge development at the Starbucks that has all these use restrictions. It's just not a great way to plan for a city. So the neighborhood probably doesn't want to hear that, but I am going to vote against the rezoning. And that's just my take on it. This is a variance, not a rezoning in my mind.
Any further comments from commissioners? We do have a motion on the floor that's been moved and properly seconded. I'll call for vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
The motion passes by my count. We'll now go to the subdivision, or would you prefer the PUD? Subdivision recommended for tentative approval with 8 listed conditions.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? On the PUD, recommended for findings of fact approval, 3 listed and 7 listed conditions. Entertain a motion.
Move to approve, subject to staff recommendations, adopting findings of facts A, B, and C.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Agenda item number 3, new subdivision applications. Mobile Logistics Park subdivision, recommended for tentative approval with 8 listed conditions. The applicant was present and in agreement.
Move to approve based on staff recommendations.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Number 4, Willis Road, Crane Works 3 subdivision, recommended for tentative approval with 7 listed conditions. Entertain a motion.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. New sidewalk waiver application number 5, 2323 Hillcrest Road. It's been recommended for denial of the sidewalk waiver. The applicant was present and had some tree explanations.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded to approve the denial of the sidewalk waiver.
No, prove the application.
Approve the waiver of the God, stop wearing ties, Doug. Air conditioning is even on. Move to approve, properly moved and seconded for approval of the waiver. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Motion passes. Group applications, agenda item 6, 8053 Will Road Drive West. Should we take this one in reverse order or just normal order?
Yeah, I'd recommend we take this in reverse order as well. Take zoning first.
I'll take your recommendation. On the rezone, it's been recommended for denial for 2 listed reasons. Applicant was present and presented their facts.
Yeah, Mr. Commissioner, just a comment here. I like the idea. I just think this is in the wrong location based on all the discussion we've had up to this point. I will move to deny the rezoning from R1 to R3.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion for denial of the rezone from R1 to R3 moves on. We will address the subdivision for Will Road Flats subdivision. Recommend.
Is the subdivision just meets and bounds to?
That's correct.
Okay.
So the zoning has no impact on the subdivision on this particular application.
Yeah, so if they needed to build if they wanted to build a single family residential house on it, they'd have to, exactly, okay.
So we continue on with the subdivision motion. Recommended for tentative approval with 7 listed conditions.
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. That concludes the listed agenda items. I see here noted other business, northwest corner of Cochran Causeway and Dunlap Drive, the Blakely Island subdivision. Staff?
Yes, sir. And I apologize, I don't have an overhead for it. It was a subdivision that was recommended for approval by the commission last year. They're getting ready to record. They have the requirement, a specific requirement of an admin PUD or a PUD on the application because there is an existing drive going off the property that serves an adjacent property. It's an existing condition, and a PUD is not required, nor under the UDC would it be required. And we are asking that the commission administratively waive that condition. There was no one present in opposition on that application, and we had no correspondence with concerns on that application, and it would strictly remove the PUD requirement from the subdivision.
That self-service truck stop gas station right outside the tunnel, right by Austin.
I would move to administratively waive the PUD requirement.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Well, we're going to adjourn the meeting and we'll reserve questions for the staff.